WHGE 95.3 FM coming up, the Open Eye. Wasn't sure I was going to be on the air today. I was locked up the station, y'all. Had to wait for the station manager to come let me in. All right, I'm here now. I'm going to do my thing. All right. Let me get right here. All right. What a day. Still going to give y'all a good hour. Try to. All righty. Gonna get my theme music up here. Yeah. All right. Those of you don't catch me live, you can catch me later. All right, here we go. Get it on. Those of us that indulge in or commit intellectual violence don't do so for the pleasure of mental masturbation or ego diddling. We do so because the chains of oppression in people's minds are deep and difficult to remove. Good morning, my children of the sun. Welcome to the Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm your host, Third Eye Optometrist, Patrice Gibbs. Yeah, I was a little late today. Can't get my mic straightened out here. What's going on? Okay. All right. Yeah. Like I said, I was a little late today. I was basically locked out of the station. We got a few changes here. And wait for the station manager to let me in, but I'm here. Every generation has its purpose. Ours is to reveal the truth and reverse the brainwashing. And that's what we do right here on Open Eye today at noon at Kirkwood Park, 11 Kirkwood Street, right here in Wilmington, Delaware. The 30th Annual African American Family Festival. That's word. Yes, indeed. Sponsored by WHGE 95.3 and the Walnut Street Y. All right, let me get my disclaimer out the way, and I'll get right to the program here. All right, let me do that right quick. All right. The views and opinions expressed on Open Eye are those of the hosts, guests, and contributors, and do not reflect the policy or position of WHGE 95.3 FM nor our sponsor, the Delaware Center for Homeless Vets. Any content provided by Open Eye's hosts, guests, or contributors are theirs and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, company, or individual. All right. Let's get them started. All right. Okay. Here we go. Let me tell you something. Tell you about the price of telling the truth. All right. We're living in an age where lies travel first class while truth is forced to hitchhike. Tell the truth about economic inequality and they call you a socialist. Tell the truth about war and they call you unpatriotic. Tell the truth about policing and they accuse you of hating law enforcement. Tell the truth about racism and suddenly you're the one dividing America. That's how power protects itself. It cannot always defeat the truth with facts, so it attacks the truth teller. History has always worked this way. They call Frederick Douglass dangerous. They called Ida B. Wells a liar. They called W.E.B. Du Bois a radical. They called Paul Robeson a traitor. They wiretapped Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They hunted Malcolm X. They imprisoned Nelson Mandela and deported Marcus Garvey. The names change, but the script never does. Every generation inherits a choice. You can become comfortable with the lie, or you become uncomfortable with the truth. The open eye has chosen discomfort. We're not here to entertain power. We're here to examine it. We're not here to repeat official narratives. We're here to question them. We're not here to comfort the comfortable. We're here to comfort those who have been denied justice while challenging the systems that deny it. That means some people will never like this program, and that's all right. The truth has never needed popularity to remain true. The measure of a society isn't how it treats powerful, it's how it treats the powerless, the poor, the forgotten, the imprisoned, the homeless veteran, the child whose life is dismissed before the investigation even begins, and the family still waiting for answers long after cameras have left. So today, I ask you not to listen with your ears alone. Listen with your conscience. Listen with your memory. Listen with your humanity. Because once your eyes are truly open, you can never honestly pretend you didn't see. I'm Patrice Gibbs. This is The Open Eye.
All right. I was putting new batteries in and make that thing work.
All right, bro. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is The Open Eye. I know many of you have seen this young Arab lady calling herself an Egyptian, claiming that her ancestry dates back to the pharaohs. Oh yeah, it's amazing how they just want to steal our history, man. But I tell you, Dr. Imad Asali, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing Imad Asa, he told it like it is. This is an Arab dude. He said, we are not pharaohs, rather we inhabited a land that the pharaohs had occupied before us. This is the kind of line that belongs on the radio at 7:45 a.m., right between the traffic report and the truth people have been avoiding for decades. Because what Dr. Asay is saying cuts straight through one of the most persistent historical distortions of the modern era. The attempted erasure of black antiquity in Egypt. Let's be clear. The pharaohs were African. The Nile Valley civilization was African. The people who carved those monuments, built those temples, and engineered those dynasties were African. And yet for generations, there's been a quiet, calculated effort to scrub that fact out of the record. Not by rewriting the hieroglyphs. Those are too stubborn. But by rewriting the story around them, by claiming the land, then claiming the legacy, then claiming the lineage. By insisting that arrival equals ancestry, that conquest equals continuity, that the Arab Islamic expansion somehow retroactively becomes the origin story of Egypt. Dr. Assad's statement is a brick through that window. He's saying, stop pretending that inheriting a country means inheriting its past. Stop using modern identity to repaint ancient faces. Stop erasing the people who actually built the civilization you're standing on. Because the erasure isn't accidental. It's political. It's convenient. It's a way to make Africa's greatest ancient achievement feel less African, less black, less connected to the people whose descendants still live along the Nile, but are too often pushed out of the narrative. This commentary matters because it restores the boundary between occupation and origin, between heritage and history, between who arrived and who built. It remains, listeners, that Egypt's antiquity is not a costume anyone can put on. It's a lineage, specific, rooted, African, and no amount of revision can change that. This is the Open Eye. Hey, Steve. All right. WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm Patrice Gibbs right here on the Open Eye. Gotta ask you something. How many black bodies have to pass across the same autopsy table before somebody asks whether the problem is the medical examiner? 4 black people die under suspicious circumstances in Mississippi. And every single one of their bodies ends up on the table of the same medical examiner, Dr. Stacy Turner.
Leave it unlocked.
Okay. 4 cases, 4 black victims, 4 rulings of no foul play. At this point, it doesn't look like coincidence. It looks like a pattern, and patterns tell stories, especially when they run straight through black death and white impunity. Give up your medical license, you racist hussy. Let's be clear. When every questionable death of a black person magically becomes no foul play, that's not medicine. That's an agenda. And Dr. Turner's agenda appears to be protecting institutions, narratives, and individuals who benefit when black families are denied answers. Let's start with Nolan Wells. A young black man allegedly drowns while surrounded by white companions who somehow leave the island with all his belongings, including a phone that was reportedly wiped clean. His family wasn't notified promptly. The stories don't match. Key organs are still being withheld from the family's independent examiner. Yet, Dr. Turner didn't hesitate. No foul play. How does a medical examiner reach a conclusion before releasing the evidence? Then, Damian Cameron, tased, restrained, pinned down by police, dead minutes later in a patrol car. Turner calls it undetermined. Independent experts call it homicide. So why is Turner's conclusion the one that conveniently shields law enforcement? Shannon Wilson dies at a lake with white companions. Turner says accident, no foul play, no deeper inquiry. And Trey Reed found hanging from a tree near his university. A scenario that demands maximum scrutiny, given America's history. Turner again. No foul play. Meanwhile, federal investigators keep digging because they clearly don't share her confidence. This is not just questionable judgment. This is a medical examiner whose rulings repeatedly erase the possibility of wrongdoing when the victim is black. That is how systemic racism operates. Not always with slurs or overt hostility, but through institutional decisions that consistently protect the powerful and silence the vulnerable. If Dr. Turner's work is legitimate, she should welcome independent review. If it isn't, she should not be allowed anywhere near cases involving black victims. Excuse me. Black families deserve truth, not rubber stamp dismissals. They deserve transparency, not withheld organs and missing reports. They deserve accountability, not a medical examiner whose conclusions collapse the moment independent experts look at the evidence. 4 black deaths, 4 suspicious circumstances, 4 rulings that shut the door on Mississippi. that shut the door on justice in Mississippi. Mississippi got an answer for this. And Dr. Turner, she needs an answer for her record. Like I said, turn in your medical license, you racist hussy, obviously with your agenda. And speaking of agenda, all right, let's get right here. I'm sure you all heard by now that the transcript of the call from the boat that Nolan Wells was on. Okay? That has me wondering how there not have been any arrests. I made sure to look this morning. So they, and from the transcript, okay, and from the CTO dispatch call, there's a young black lady who's an audio engineer that took her own time and money to examine this call. And what she found should have rocked the case. And here's the interesting thing, and this tells me everything I need to know about the mayonnaise mafia. She's getting death threats. She's getting death threats for bringing out the truth. For those of you that don't know, the first thing you hear on that audio is, can we cover it up? And you hear a male voice. Sure he's dead? Female voice, is he dead? Male voice hollers, Nolan. Female voice, oh my God. Male voice, Nolan, come on, don't die. Then you hear the CTO assistant, Vicky speaking, can I help you? And they tell her about the boat is sinking. All right. And you hear a male voice holler, wake the F up. Yeah. As I said, this was the what we call the smoking gun. Can we cover it up? Yeah, I thought about that. Oh, you killed him. He's already dead. Is he dead? Yeah. Nolan. Oh my God, Nolan, wake up. Why? Come on, man, get up. Get the F up. Damn it, Bart. Who's Bart? You need to know that. All right. The call contains several phrases, okay, that need to be looked at. What is law enforcement doing? Can we cover it up? Can we cover it up? We'll keep moving right here, moving right along. How many of you heard of Brandon Tatum? Former cop Brandon Tatum. He's a black man. Coon alert. Because Brandon Tatum operates like a man who thinks volume is a substitute for value. He's loud because he gotta be. Because if you ever slow it down long enough for people to actually examine what he's saying, the whole act will collapse under its own emptiness. His commentary isn't built on insight, it's built on adrenaline and algorithmic desperation. On top of which he's a goddamn liar. He's not a thinker. He's not a strategist. He's not even a contrarian. He's a content machine. A man who wakes up every morning and asks, well, what can I be outraged about today? His entire persona is a performance of indignation, a perpetual audition for relevance. And like most auditions, it's painfully obvious when somebody is trying too damn hard. Oh, Tatum's brand is the political version of a clearance rack suit, shiny at first glance, flimsy up close. and guaranteed to fall apart the moment it's exposed to real pressure. You see, this sorry son of a bitch, he thrives on misrepresentation, cherry pick narratives, and the kind of false tough talk that evaporates the moment he's confronted by someone with actual intelligence. He claims he's holding people accountable, but accountability requires honesty, and honesty requires depth. And of course, Tatum avoids both. Instead, he leans on the same tired formula used by every short-lived personality who mistook being provocative for being profound. He's not challenging systems, he's feeding them. He's not speaking truth to power, he's speaking whatever power wants amplified. He went after D.L. Hughley. And D.L. Hughley, he hit him hard. Because the more you look at Tatum's trajectory, this lane has a high turnover rate. And Tatum is already showing the early signs of becoming yesterday's algorithmic darling. The moment his shock value stick stops generating clicks, he'll be replaced by somebody younger, louder, even more willing to say whatever keeps the lights on. His defensiveness is the clearest tell. Whenever someone with a real resume, real longevity, and real cultural weight calls him out, he doesn't rise to the challenge, he melts. He frames criticism as persecution because it's easier than admitting he's built his platform on shallow takes and borrowed bravado. Remember, this is the same sorry bastard that claimed the murderer, what's her name? Oh my God. Miss Macy, the young lady with the, that called the cops because she was in distress. Sonia Macy. Yeah, she called the cops because she was in distress. And recognized the evil cop that eventually murdered her. And told him, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. And what did random Tatum do? He got up and said the murder was justified. See, it's one of these people, I don't know how his family deals with him. Because if he showed up at our barbecue, he'd leave with my foot in his ass. He's not a movement, he's not a leader, he ain't even a thinker. He a placeholder. A sorry-ass temporary fixture and a long line of personalities that confuse visibility with significance. Candace Owens. What's her name? Stacey Dash. You know, this sorry bastard, he cried when Charlie Kirk got killed. Most black people would piss on Charlie Kirk's grave. And what's this cremated fool do? He's up crying over Charlie Kirk. It tells you more than enough that we need to know about him. Because when the algorithm moves on, as it always does, he'll be exactly where D.L. Hughley predicted, sitting in the same pile of forgotten liars and coons who mistook attention for legacy. This is the Open Eye. I'm Patrice Gibbs. Yeah, calm my ass down here a little bit. Hey, Sherry. All right. All right. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is the Open Eye. You know, when I first heard about the death of Nolan Wells, I said, watch the script. Watch how they do this. Not because I possess some special gift of prophecy, but because this country has been running the same script for generations. Different names, different cities, different decades, the same script. Let me tell you how it goes. Step 1. Authorities release an initial version of events. Sometimes it's accurate. Sometimes it later changes dramatically. But the first version almost always shapes public opinion before the evidence has been fully examined. Step 2. The media reports or repeats that initial narrative across television screens, newspapers, websites, and social media until it becomes the story everyone thinks they know. Step 3. Attention quietly shifts away from the unanswered questions surrounding the death and toward the conduct of the deceased. Was he drinking? Did he have marijuana in his system? Had he been in trouble before? Was he argumentative? Was he difficult? Why is TMZ reporting that Nolan Wells was drinking heavily? Suddenly, the investigations no longer center on what happened to him. It becomes an investigation of who he was. And step 4 is perhaps the most predictable of all. The black victim ends up on trial. Not in the courtroom, in the court of public opinion. Now look at what's happening. One of the headlines making the rounds already. Nolan Wells investigation. Witnesses tell police teen was drinking heavily on Horn Island before his death. Who said so? Who are these witnesses? Are they the same ones that we pretty much believe, especially after that transcript, were involved in his murder? Yeah, I heard black people. Well, it wasn't necessarily about race. Okay, let's go with that. Let's say they didn't kill him because he was black. Let's go with that. The thing is this. The aftermath was all about protecting these white kids. Got the goddamn governor complaining about Ben Trump and Al Sharpton. So he sounds just like he from 1962, complaining about these up north black people or coloreds coming into our state, stirring up trouble with our Negroes. Ask yourself a simple question. Why is the headline, witnesses tell police teen was drinking? Why is that the headline? Why is that the detail being amplified before the public has answers to the larger questions surrounding this young man's death? What purpose does it serve? Because that single sentence plants an idea in the public's mind. It whispers, maybe it was his fault. See, and that's the thing right there. Maybe he brought this on himself. Maybe the people around him aren't really responsible. See, that's how the narratives get construed and constructed. Not by proving something happened, by suggesting it, by planting seeds, by framing the conversation before all the facts are known. Did we seen this before? Whenever a black life is lost under suspicious or disputed circumstances, too often the conversation quickly shifts from who is responsible to what the victim was doing. Okay. Now, just recently, I saw a report where this white man murdered his whole family and then killed himself. It made me think of what one of the influencers I saw say this morning, one of the most dangerous places for white people is in a white family. Because if all of a sudden dad decides, this is not right, this is not for me, kill the whole family and himself. And what do we get? What is the propaganda we get from the press? Oh, we get family photos. We get photos of them having a picnic. The father's graduation. What a great businessman he was. And how sympathetic we should be for this murderous bastard. Especially when you consider some of the circumstances that these murders take place under. Because what's being alleged with one of these cases is that his wife caught him raping their son. But he was a good businessman. And what happens when the black victim, they search up and try to find a mug shot. Oh, they got him taken out of the store when he was 7 years old because he put a candy bar in his pocket. Yeah, who was responsible? Yeah, that's what was the victim doing? That's a completely different question. Meanwhile, compare that to the treatment many white suspects or perpetrators receive in the media. Like I told you, see, smiling family photographs. Neighbors describing them as quiet. Stories about mental health, stress, financial pressures, relationship problems. But when the deceased is black, too often the search begins immediately for anything that can be used to diminish sympathy or shift blame. That difference is framing matters. Because public opinion is often formed long before juries ever hear evidence, before independent investigators finish their work, and before families receive answers. That's why Nolan Wells' family and supporters have worked tirelessly to share pictures of his life, his smile, his loved ones, and the young man that they knew. If we don't tell our loved one's story, someone else will. Yeah, they'll tell it for us. And too often, they will tell it in a way that serves someone else's narrative. Every generation has to learn to recognize these patterns. Not to prejudge, not to rush to conclusions, but to understand how narratives are built, how public opinion is shaped, and how easily attention can be redirected away from unanswered questions. Never stop asking questions. Never confuse a headline with the truth. And never allow a person's humanity to be reduced to a single line in the news report. This is Open Eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. Let me tell you something. I don't care how many times they changed the name. You ever see one of those crooked companies? As soon as they get caught, they're doing something slimy, they come up with a new name. That's usually them pyramid scheme companies. But the path and the pattern doesn't change. Just like the path from the Confederacy to the Klan, the MAGA, is not some crooked maze of unrelated events. It's a straight line. It's a continuous current. The same disease, changing clothes, changing slogans, changing tactics, but never changing its purpose. And America keeps pretending the infection disappeared because the fever broke for a moment. You know what this country did after the Civil War is stop the treatment too early. 4 years of war, over 600,000 dead, cities burned, families shattered, blood soaking the soil from Battle of Gettysburg to Sherman's March to the Sea. And after all that sacrifice, after finally crushing the Confederacy militarily, America lost its nerve politically. Oh, the Confederacy surrendered, but Confederate ideology did not. See, Reconstruction was supposed to be the antibiotic, the treatment, the cleansing of the infection. Black men voting, black legislators taking office, federal troops protecting freedmen. The attempt, however, incomplete, to build a multiracial democracy in the ashes of slavery. But America quit the prescription halfway through. White terror organizations like the Ku Klux Klan emerged almost immediately. Not because they hated government, not because of states' rights. They emerged for one reason: to restore white power. And what did they target first? Black voting, black education, black economic independence, black political representation. You sound familiar? Because the strategy never changed. The same spirit that rolled through the South with white hoods and burning crosses now sits in state legislatures drawing racial gerrymandering maps. The same mentality that once used literacy tests now uses voter roll purges and polling place enclosures. The same rage that could not stand free black people holding office now explodes every time a black judge, black scholar, black mayor, or black president rises to prominence. Different uniforms, same war. How many times you heard people say, well, Obama was divisive? See, because people love to romanticize the Confederacy like it was some noble misunderstanding between brothers. No. The Confederacy was a violent rebellion built explicitly to preserve human bondage. The succession documents said it plainly. I don't give a damn what these revisionists say. Mississippi said slavery was the greatest material interest in the world. They told you exactly what they were fighting for. And after the war, America allowed those ideals to survive. Former Confederates regained political power. Terrorists were pardoned. Reconstruction collapsed in 1877. Federal protection vanished. And then came nearly a century of lynching, segregation, racial massacres, disenfranchisement, housing theft, economic sabotage, and educational apartheid. The infection came roaring back stronger because it was never eradicated. That's why the path is straight. Confederacy, Klan, Jim Crow, massive resistance, the Southern strategy, the Tea Party, birtherism, MAGA straight line. And let me tell you something else. Every generation of Americans keeps making the same mistake. They think racism is just a personality flaw. Just ignorance. Just somebody saying something offensive at Thanksgiving dinner. No. Racism in America has always been political power married to economic control and forced through violence, physical, legal, social, or psychological. That's why every time this country gets close to real multiracial democracy, the backlash comes hard. After Reconstruction came the Klan. After the Civil Rights Movement came Nixon and the Southern strategy. And Reagan made roast in hell and made the devil sodomize him with a pitchfork. Reagan announcing his presidency in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where 3 civil rights workers were killed with the words, "I believe in states' rights." States' rights to do what? After Barack Obama came MAGA. Reaction, retrenchment, retaliation over and over again. And what makes this woman dangerous is that too many people still refuse to recognize the pattern. They keep treating the symbols instead, they keep treating the symptoms instead of confronting the disease itself. They want unity without truth, healing without accountability, reconciliation without justice. Compromise means do it my way. See, that's how infections survive. You cannot heal what you refuse to diagnose. And history is screaming the diagnosis right in America's face. The path from the Confederacy to the Klan to MAGA is a straight line because the core ideal never died. The belief that this country should belong politically, culturally, and economically to one group above all others. That poison is never fully removed from the mainstream of America. And every generation that refuses to confront it leaves the next generation to fight even uglier versions of it. Yeah. Even uglier. Because we know what happens. But see, it is the thing. And people need to recognize as they continue to just do damage to the country and the world, because everywhere you look, everywhere they've been, they bring death and disease. Everywhere you look. And one of the things they're damaging, of course, is the environment. Because they have no understanding of the world. And what they don't understand is that the earth is a living entity. And like most living entities, it recognizes when it has a problem. These people are a virus. Told you that before. And what does your body do when it gets a virus? It gets a fever. That makes it too hot for that virus to survive. You see people out here, can't take the heat. Because the earth is self-correcting. And it recognizes that virus. And it will eradicate it. And see, we keep treating this like it's a debate. It's not. And I keep telling y'all, this is not about just liberation. It's about survival. It's a survival struggle. And that line wasn't just straight, it's a fuse. And that fuse has been burning since the first ship touched the sand. The only thing that has ever stopped the eliminate gear from turning is raw, unyielding resistance. Because at the end of that straight line isn't a peaceful democracy. It's a graveyard. And they've already started digging. It's going to take more than a vote this time. I'm Patrice Gibbs. This is The Open Eye. Hey, how you doing? All right. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is The Open Eye. You know, I'll tell you something about the orange disaster. And what they really want. You know, the orange disaster is just a puppet for the most part. Right? Those controlling him. What they really want is to take us back to the Gilded Age. Back to the McKinley presidency, where whites collective, where the rich elite whites collected wealth with no responsibility. You know, before 1913, when Woodrow Wilson wrung about the income tax. Yeah, they act like they. You know, it was a documentary on the History Channel, The Men Who Built America, and it was all about the robber barons, basically. Yeah, the men who built America, all white men. J.P. Morgan, Carnegie. Yeah. You know, it's something. Rachel Maddow pointed to something a lot of people still refuse to say plainly. And that's the relationship. She talked about the relationship between the Trump administration and Black America. Understand something. It's not random policy what they're doing. It's not a coincidence. It's damn sure ain't no colorblind government reform. It is targeted political and institutional rollback aimed directly at Black presence, Black influence, and Black advancement in American public life. We are at war. Okay? And we are not at war by our own devices. White supremacy has declared war on us. And it's been an ongoing war, actually. Before and after the Civil War. After the Civil War, of course, Black Americans briefly entered the machinery of American democracy in meaningful numbers. Like I said, during Reconstruction, Black legislators, judges, Black educators, Black administrators, and Black business leaders emerged across the South and inside federal institutions. And what I tell you, what happened? Organized backlash, violent backlash. And the message was simple. Okay? You're going too far, you got too visible, and you're getting too damn powerful. That's how we got Jim Crow. And came, like I said, the Civil Rights Movement, which is really the second Reconstruction. And it was another expansion of black participation in American life. Federal jobs became one of the few stable pathways into middle class for black America, because the federal government, at least in theory, has civil service protections that private industry often didn't. Black families built careers through the postal service, transportation agencies, education and departments, labor boards, regulatory commissions, and military leadership. Now look at this. The attacks begin with DEI, but notice something. They never define diversity as incompetence when people removed are black. The assumption is built in. The accusation is implied. Black achievement itself becomes suspicious. So suddenly highly accomplished black people are erased from positions across government. And just name a few: General Charles C.Q. Brown, Carla Hayden, Lisa Cook, Wayne Wilcox, Willie Phillips, Peggy Carter, one after another, after another, after another. And the pattern becomes impossible not to see unless you are determined not to see it. Because see, the people controlling old poopy drawers. You ever seen people sitting next to him? They holding their nose, frowning up. Damn. But this is how desperate they are. They'll put up with somebody with shit in their pants so they can hold power. See, because they understand hierarchy. They understand racial signaling. That's why these firings are public spectacles. Hey. Not just you're fired, but know your place. Yeah. And let's look at the important historical connection when I invoke Woodrow Wilson and McKinley, especially Wilson. Because the Wilson administration resegregated the federal government intentionally. Black workers who had clawed their way into federal employment were humiliated, isolated, demoted, fenced off physically, actually fenced off. If you were a black person during the Wilson administration and they couldn't just kick you out, they would put like a cubicle around you to separate you from the white people. You were actually physically fenced off from white workers and stripped of dignity by policy. And that's not ancient history. That was in the 20th century. You know my grandparents and great-grandparents like. See, America likes to talk about racism as if it were a strange little detour in the national story. Like it was an embarrassing fashion trend, like we had in the 70s when we wore platform shoes or some crap. Like, you know, it was a fashion trend that we outgrew. But racism in America has always been structural before it was personal. It's always been about power before prejudice. It's always been about controlling access to jobs, institution, wealth, education, law, and legitimacy. And what we're seeing now is an attempt to redefine black participation in government itself as illegitimate. And that's the real goal. Because when black people occupy visible positions of authority, competence, scholarship, regulation, military leadership, economics, and governance, it disrupts the mythology this country has depended on for centuries. That mythology says whiteness is naturally entitled to rule. So every black face in power becomes, to some people, an affront. That's why the attack on DI is bigger than a slogan. See, because it's being used as a crowbar to pry black America out of spaces they fought generations to enter. Hey, it's not merely a political disagreement. It's a struggle over who is allowed to fully belong in America's institutions. And history teaches us something dangerous. When nations begin targeting educated, accomplished, visual minority populations inside public institutions, that is not a sign of democratic confidence. It's a sign of democratic decay. And let's remember who we are. Because we are the only people here by invitation. A dubious invitation, no doubt. See, they get tired of Arabs, they can send them back to an Arab country. They get tired of Hispanics, then you send them back to South America. They get tired of East Indians, send them back. Get tired of Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, Vietnamese, send them back to Asia. But you can't send us back. Because you stripped us of our connection to Africa, which many of us work hard to reestablish. But you stripped us of our language, our culture, our spirituality, and our connection to our tribe. So we don't know exactly where we came from, and neither do you. So you really would like to kick us out. We're a problem that you created. Because damn, what we gonna do with these niggers? We can't put them out. See, the question is not whether the pattern exists. It does. The question is whether Americans are honest enough to admit what they're looking at while it's happening. Because future generations are going to study this era the same way we studied Reconstruction, Jim Crow, redlining, and segregation. And they're going to ask the same questions every generation asks when injustice becomes obvious in hindsight. How do so many people pretend not to see it? I'm Patrice Gibbs. This is The Open Eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm Patrice Gibbs. I talk about the institutions and the systems, but don't get it mixed. Those institutions and systems have a face. And we see that face on the internet, on the news, and what have you all the time. Let me tell you about one of them faces and the crap that they do. And understand, this is one of the symptoms. In April of this year, April 12th, 2026, Riverside Park in Indianapolis, you might have heard about this, an 18-year-old black teenager named Dalen Brewer raised his hands in surrender. How many times have you heard of that? A white sergeant, Robin Frazier, later wrote a sworn affidavit claiming he pointed a revolver at her and mind pulling the trigger. The body cam showed the opposite. A Wilmington. Brewer's case is not an aberration. It's a contemporary expression of a national pattern that stretches back centuries. A pattern in which police authority, racial hierarchy, and fabricated narratives have repeatedly intersected to produce a devastating consequence for Black Americans. To understand Indianapolis, you must understand America. The origins, policing, and racial control. American policing did not begin as a neutral institution. In the South, it emerged from slave patrols. Armed white men empowered to stop, search, question, and punish Black people without cause. Their authority rested on racial presumption. The Black body was always suspect, always dangerous, always in need of control. In the North, early policing was shaped by the protection of property and suppression of labor movements. But racialized enforcement quickly followed. Black communities were disproportionately surveilled, arrested, and punished. The foundational logic was simple. White authority defines the narrative, Black presence defines the threat. And this logic did not disappear, it evolved. As Black Americans migrated to cities like Indianapolis during the Great Migration, policing adapted. Officers were trained, formally and informally, to view Black neighborhoods as inherently criminal. Arrests skyrocketed. Police reports routinely framed Black suspects as aggressive, armed, or threatening, even when evidence contradicted those claims. The dangerous Black suspect trope became a national script. It justified stops, it justified searches, it justified force, it justified fabricated narratives. Indianapolis was no exception. Throughout the 20th century, Black residents reported disproportionate stops, beatings, and arrests, often accompanied by officers' statements that contradicted witnesses' accounts. The affidavit became a tool of racial storytelling. By the late 20th century, scholars and judges began naming a phenomenon long understood in Black communities. Testifying. Police lying under oath. It was not rare, it was routine. Officers fabricated furtive movements, imaginary weapons, non-existent threats, resistance that never occurred. Because one of the most horrifying statements as a Black person in police custody you can hear is stop resisting, because that's often followed by gunfire. Just reaching for a waistband. Make you good in your life. And these narratives are not random. They never were. They were racially patterned. Black defendants were disproportionately targeted, charged, and convicted based on the officer's testimony alone. Courts, prosecutors, juries often accepted these narratives without question. The officer's word was truth. The Black defendant's word was defense. This credibility gap is not incidental, it's historical. Now, Indianapolis has spent decades confronting and often failing to confront the same pattern seen nationwide. disproportionate stops of black residents, use of force incidents with conflicting officer narratives, Kadir Skinner, internal investigations that clear officers despite the evidence, civil rights lawsuits alleging fabricated reports and unconstitutional arrests, settlements that acknowledge harm but rarely produce structural change. The Brewer case fits seamlessly into that lineage. A white sergeant's affidavit was accepted as fact. A black teenager's raised hands were nearly erased. The machinery of prosecution activated instantly. Only the body cam interrupted the narrative. Without that footage, Brewer might today be facing decades in prison. Because that racist hussy accused him of attempted murder. Now, Indianapolis did not create this dynamic, it inherited. Body cams were introduced as a reform, a way to ensuring transparency and accountability. But they did not change the underlying culture. They simply created a second record. The first record is the police report. The second record is the truth. When those two records conflict, the system faces a choice. Believe the officer or believe the evidence. Brewer's case shows how deeply the system still defaults to the officer, even when the officer's narrative is implausible, uncorroborated, or contradicted by the video. The body cam did not prevent the lie. It only prevented the lie from winning. Most of the time. Because they will tell. We investigated ourselves and decided we didn't do anything wrong in spite of the evidence. Now, Brewer has filed a federal lawsuit, and well, he should, alleging false arrest, fabrication of evidence, defamation, and constitutional violations. And this is part of a long tradition of black Americans using the courts to challenge police misconduct. But historically, few officers face discipline or for fabrication. Fewer face criminal charges. Even fewer lose their jobs. And if they do, they're allowed to resign and then just go to the next town and get a job. Cities settle cases without admitting any wrongdoing. That's why the pattern continues. Brewer's suit is not just about one officer. It's about whether Indianapolis and America will confront the structural roots of fabricated police narratives. His raised hands are a symbol. So is her affidavit. One represents truth, the other represents power. In Brewer's experience, it echoes across the country. Officers claiming suspects pointing guns when video shows empty hands, like Kadir Skinner. Officers claiming aggressive movements contradicted by footage. Officers claiming resistance disproven by audio. Officers claiming threats that witnesses never heard or saw. Officers claiming furtive gestures that cameras never captured. And these narratives are not isolated, they're systemic. They reflect racial bias, institutional protection, prosecutorial deference, historical precedents, cultural norms within policing, the presumption of officer honesty, the presumption of black guilt. Brewer's case is simply the latest chapter. When Sergeant Frazier wrote her affidavit, she was not inventing a new tactic. She was participating in a tradition, one that stretches from slave patrols, the Jim Crow, the modern testifying. When Brewer raised his hands, when that young man raised his hands, he was participating in another tradition, one in which black Americans must perform. They must perform innocence to survive encounters with police. The body cam did not create justice, it created evidence. Justice is what happens when evidence is believed and acted on. And so the question remains, how many fabricated narratives have shaped American policing, and how many would still be shaping it if the camera hadn't been rolling? I'm Patrice Gibbs. This is The Open Eye. All right. Coming around to the close here. Let's see how long I've been at it about it. I've been at it a minute here. But at any rate, coming around to the close here. I hope you learned something today, because I learned something before I got here. And as we close today's broadcast, remember this. Empires do not collapse because they run out of money. They collapse because they run out of truth. When lies become policy, when propaganda replaces journalism, when justice depends on your race, your wealth, or your political usefulness, when profit becomes more sacred than people, a nation may still look powerful, but its foundation is already cracking. Never confuse noise with strength. The loudest societies are often trying to drown out the sound of their own decay. That's why it's your responsibility. That's why your responsibility is so important. Read more, study more, question more. Teach your children history that begins long before slavery and extends far beyond the narrow pages of a textbook. That's what my mama did, God bless her. Support institutions that serve your community. Build businesses. Protect one another. Organize. Vote where it matters. Hold leaders accountable, whether they wear a blue tie, a red tie, a black robe, a badge. Real freedom is never given, it's built, defended, and passed from one generation to the next. And remember this. Hope is not optimism. Hope is discipline. Hope is getting up every morning and continuing to work even when the odds seem impossible. Our ancestors planted trees whose shade they would never live to enjoy. The least we can do is plant a few more. We have the personnel. We have the funds. We have the plan. I know, because the ancestors gave it to me and I wrote it down. So until next time, keep your eyes open, your mind sharp, sharper than your anger, and your heart committed to justice. Study, question everything, including me. And like we always tell you, destiny determines who enters your life. You decide who stays. Therefore, value those who value you, and don't treat those as a priority who treat you as an option. Thanks for joining me. This has been The Open Eye. Peace. All right. Head, shut. Hope you learned something. Oh, don't think I forgot. Global African supremacy. Keep your eyes open. I'm Patrice Gibbs. Peace and love.